Hello, everyone. Today I'll be talking about the importance of worldview and objectivity when it comes to teaching history in the classroom. Andreas Bolt, in our reading for this week, disputes Ranke's view that history should be taught simply as it was, claiming that this was an impossible dream. Bolt mentions that despite being a pro-Protestant statist studying England, Ranke's own views became more sympathetic to Irish Catholics due to his own wife's Irish heritage. Ranke shouldn't be ignored, however, because he still relied heavily on hard data like bibliographies or archival research for his work, and his infusion of cultural and oral history also greatly helped shape his research far beyond the hard data of teaching history, simply as it was. I decided also to look at Michael H. Romanowski's work on influences that shape the teaching of American history. Now, Romanowski's article focused more on teaching high school classes, but I still found this insight to be valuable. His article relied on qualitative research from 6 American secondary school teachers and found that a few particular things shaped how these teachers covered certain topics, including religion, morality, social or family class background, and the influence of college professors. For example, religious views on some of these teachers might have shaped how they covered certain controversial topics like slavery or the nuclear bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The influence of college professors might have influenced how these high school teachers shaped the pedagogical practices while they were teaching in the classroom. And family upbringing or social class could have dictated what was emphasized in the classroom, for example, military history or labor movement history. Experienced teachers are often more aware of their own biases and try to counteract them, while less experienced instructors often think that they're impartial while not necessarily being so. Gideon Boadu's work, which I also looked at, delved into how secondary school teachers understand historical objectivity. In-depth interviews were conducted with teachers from Ghana for the purposes of his study, and what he found was that teachers had a constructionist approach, meaning that while concrete historical evidence is certainly necessary for teaching on past realities, an historian needs to be able to intervene and interpret the past to give it meaning. Yet despite this in the classroom, these teachers did not challenge their students to question evidence or look at a bias. Instead, it seemed as if there was an authoritative grand narrative of events that were simply taught. In other words, there was a gap between the instructor's own reasoning and how they actually practiced. Meanwhile, Martha McCaughey also explores the issue of scholar activism, an issue that's garnering a lot of controversy in present day. McCaughey claims that a sharper line has to be drawn between political advocacy and scholarship, or else the very institution of higher education will be severely degraded, while noting that many really want their work to matter. Particularly in the modern context, scholar activism generates mistrust from the broader public and brings political backlash to academia. True scholarship means respecting evidence even if it does not match up with the personal opinions of that scholar. Otherwise, the public will just see these experts not as being impartial or being experts at all, but instead actors with a certain agenda. The alternative that's most helpful is scholar optimism, where the scholar can help produce research that hopefully will allow future generations to solve certain issues down the road, but without coming across as a biased activist. John Fee covers the topic from a Christian lens, noting that earlier Christian scholars like George Marsden and Mark Knoll warned against historian activists that could mine history in order to support their own biases. Basically, this is viewing the past through a present worldview, which sadly an increasing number of scholars in our day are doing. While Fee is sympathetic to how difficult it can be to speak about or against historic injustices and that conflict with biblical values, he also notes that activism cannot be allowed to take precedence in historical research. If that were to happen, it would erode the nuances and complexities of history. So the strong middle ground would be for Christian historians to speak strongly about the present, but have their primary responsibility in their studies for appreciating the past's messy contradictions. And in fact, studying and teaching history could work hand in hand with moral values like humility or self-reflection. Arthur Alpheix-Assis also heavily focuses on the moral relativist attempt to move historical teaching from unbiased, imaginative hard data to postmodernist ways of thinking. He forms a lot of his argument on Cicero's claim that historians must never move in a falsehood. Historians can and do argue over whether truly unbiased history is possible or has ever even been done before. But no respectable scholar would base his or her research on fabrications and exaggerations. It's ethical to be objective when it comes to history because one can still be passionate about the subject and politically situated while also avoiding lies, falsehood, agenda-driven research and teaching, or exaggeration. This is key to avoiding deceiving others and also deceiving one's own self in their preconceived notions when confronted with evidence that could prove otherwise. Thank you.